We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. I'm John Schmidt. I'm acting as guest chair since Mr. Steeler is gone. The first thing that we're going to do on the agenda for the Forest Lake Airport Commission is call the roll, and I will be calling the roll. Mr. Dahlbeck?
Present.
Mr. Husnick?
Here.
Mr. Munson?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt is here, and Mr. Steeler is absent. We have 4 commissioners out of 5. We have a quorum. Agenda number 2 is the minutes from last month's meeting. You all have a copy in front of you. I'll give you a few moments to look through the minutes, and then I'll wait to entertain a motion to pass or to amend as needed.
I will make a motion to approve them as they are, unless you see any changes.
I'll second.
Dahlbeck, Husnick, motion to approve the minutes as presented in the meeting and at the city website. Are there any further discussion? Any at all? The roll is taken. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? None. All right, real good. The motion passes. Agenda number 3, Bolton Mink. Mr. Parmar, good to see you.
Yes, likewise. Thanks again for the time. So kind of number 1 on the agenda is the runway, taxiway, apron, and taxi lanes pavement maintenance project. Kind of as we discussed last month, we did receive the go-ahead from City Council to proceed with that project. So where we are at is a copy of the plans are within the Bolton and Mink update if you desire to kind of flip through them. But we're requesting quotes from pavement maintenance contractors who have done work, similar work in town. What we're proposing here is a seal coat and crack repair. I can kind of zoom in. So as part of the master plan, what we had completed was some aerial photography, which was also nice to double up to check to make sure we kind of have all the cracks identified. So technology is amazing with these UAS drones. You can zoom right in, and I hope the security camera on this hangar is not watching, but
Careful.
so nonetheless, we're expecting contractors. We sent the quote package out to 8 who have done work in town before. I've heard from 4 for sure that they're going to submit their quote by next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then from there, I will review the quotes and then make a recommendation for the council meeting on the 16th for the city council to approve the low quote kind of contingent on receipt of the MnDOT grant funding. As I mentioned last month, the master plan and the pavement rehab project, the grant is going to be tied together, which is why we wanted to open bids for that project this year, knowing the work will be completed in 2020 so that the city can get just one grant for both the pavement maintenance and the master plan and ALP update project. So at the November meeting, I'll have more detailed information about the low bidder, the cost, and we can go from there. But if anyone's got questions about that project, I can surely answer them now.
Silas, I'm looking at page 3, and there's an extension pictured on page 3. That's not part of this project. That's part of a different part of your presentation. Is that correct?
Yeah, page 3 is part of the master plan.
I'm sorry.
Kind of the graphic that I presented last month, kind of just showing what we're considering as part of that project. I'll get into that a little bit more in the next area if no one has any questions about the pavement maintenance project.
Any questions at all?
Well, as far as the maintenance project is concerned, I mean, we kind of went through that pretty thoroughly last time. And
Correct, yep.
the city council was on board with it, especially when you're talking about 5% money, 95, 90.
Correct. I mean, that's the great thing about, MnDOT providing funding for airports.
Yep.
All right, well, on to that, kind of jump over into the master plan and airport layout plan. So after the meeting, the airport commission meeting last month, we kind of kicked off the project. And the first part of that was doing an inventory of the airport. So what you see on this website here, I've included the link here. It works in Internet Explorer, but it's best in Google Chrome. What we did was we took kind of aerial photography of the airport and the areas that may be future development. So kind of over by Hangar Echo here, you can kind of see what this was, where it's kind of brighter, was areas that we were able to use a drone to get some updated aerial photography, and the resolution and quality is pretty good. I mean, you can zoom pretty much in and get an idea of what's there, and then also, you know, the pavements, kind of the Farmer Access Road here, which, you know, this is all city proper, airport property, likewise with the little wetland here. But having this updated imagery really allows us to get a good snapshot of what the existing features are for the airport. If you go to Google Earth or Bing Maps, it won't have 3 of the hangars that were just most recently constructed out here at the airport. It's kind of interesting. We didn't notice this in the field, but you can actually see there's some building materials for the future FPO hangar that's going to get constructed in this area. It's kind of some taller lying grass there. But just having this updated imagery, you know, kind of goes a long way towards the master plan so we can snapshot what's there. What we also did was took ground photos to kind of inventory the existing pavement, the existing facilities, you know, the fuel, the AD building, and then also kind of the private hangars there, and then Hangar Echo, just so that if we need to reference a certain portion of the airport as part of the study, we have that information. Now, the ground photos I have submitted to Mr. Undum. I'm not sure if anyone desires to have a copy of those, or if make them available on the website. We surely could do that as well, but I think if you're messing around with the airport aerial, I mean, this might be the best website to kind of take a look and see some features that are there that you may not see in other aerials.
Dan, can we get those photos on the city airport website?
If I recall, wasn't the file size pretty large on? I mean, I had to reformat them.
Yeah, I sent you, they're available on an FTP website with which I gave Dan access to so he could download them all. If you surely want to download them all and keep them on your own hard drive, I can surely forward you that information. But yeah, each photo is, 5 to 7 megabytes, so it, there's the way it's set up now is if you have them downloaded on your computer, you can just look up a website that'll show all the photos and then you click on them for a larger version. But I'll see if we can kind of trim the size down, and if Dan wants to make them available on the website or just send them out specifically to the Airport Commission, we can surely do that as well.
The reason for the edges being the way they are is the composite nature of taking lots and lots of frames and putting them together, sometimes
That is
like
correct.
World War II recon photos.
So how Chris Gardner, the aviation planner that was with me last month, he's one of our UAS pilots as well. He sets the path for the drone, and then off it goes, and then you just watch it and monitor the radio to make sure no traffic's coming in. But otherwise, the drone does the work itself. If you click on the tab here on the left, you'll see there's 1,073 images that were snapped, and then they're stitched together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can click on one and it won't show you really anything other than that, but it's kind of a neat feature of, how the software stitches all the aerial photos together and then provides you kind of this higher quality imagery. So, I mean, you can go right down to the sign, you can see the culverts, you can see the paving joints. So it's pretty cool technology that I always like to share with interested parties for the airport. So you can, I mean, if you're curious why your roof's leaking, you might be able to see it on here for all I know.
That was a good one.
I would really like to see this on our city airport website, if we could, Dan. Can I just maybe ask you without a motion just to?
Yeah, I'll take a look. If I get smaller photos of the.
Well, you might be able to post a link, Mr. Undum, just of this on the
link.
website.
Yeah, I can do a link.
That would be a
over
lot
to it.
easier.
Yeah, I
Yep.
can do.
Let
I
the
can take
user
the link
use
that's
his
in
computer. Yeah,
this
yeah.
report and click it
Yeah.
over there. Yeah,
Yep.
not a problem.
The photos, that might be a little bit more difficult, but I'll work to minimize those sizes. So like I mentioned, the first part is inventorying what's at your airport. The second part is the user surveys. So we sent an email blast out a couple of weeks ago to the information that we did receive from Mr. Undum about the tenants at the airport or who's ever leasing the lot. So some of you have most likely probably already filled out the user survey. But what we're trying to do is get as many as possible to submit it. So we're still working with Mr. Undum to get a list of all the aircraft that are actually registered at the Forest Lake Airport. If any of you guys know folks that either utilize the airport or may utilize it, we'd encourage you to direct them to the city website to complete the user survey. What we're also planning on doing is getting the base aircraft list for Anoka, Cambridge, and possibly the Mora Airport, and mailing them a letter saying, hey, the city of Forest Lake is updating their master plan. We'd like your input if possible, because you may be able to attract some future tenants from those airports who might say in the survey, yes, we would base our aircraft at Forest Lake if space allowed, because as you guys are aware, there's not any lots available for lease per se right now. So we really want to get as many people to respond to the user survey as possible, because that really drives the data moving forward to determine, what type of hangar lots to develop. Do you need some larger, more corporate FBO type hangar lots like the one that's currently under construction right now? Do you possibly need some T hangars, or do you have most folks that just want to lease land from the city and build their own private hangar? So getting as much of that data goes a long way. And then what we're also trying to do is get as many businesses to respond as possible. Or again, we're working with the city to get contact information for local businesses in town, and then also contacting, businesses that currently operate at other airports, saying, if certain facilities were made available at Forest Lake, would you expand your business or possibly, relocate to an airport here? I know one thing that I've heard so far that on the business side of things is 2,700 feet is kind of tough for certain businesses to get in and out with their aircraft, and then also without any GPS approaches to either end. If you can take off, file a flight plan, but if for some reason if you need to come back, you may not be able to get back to Forest Lake if conditions like today exist. So that's the type of feedback that we're looking to get as part of the user survey. So the numbers are here. So far, we've gotten 18 user survey and 1 business survey, but there's 28 hangars there at the airport, so we know for sure the number is only going to go up. So I encourage you, and looking for your help, for if anyone at the airport that hasn't filled it out, remind them again, and we'll go from there. And then the next step, so our plan is for the December meeting. With the survey, we're proposing to close it in the early part of November, and then gives us, a couple weeks in November to complete an analysis, and then bring that data, kind of the inventory data and the forecasting data, back to the Airport Commission for the December meeting to really start having discussions about the kind of future facility requirements that you guys see fit. So I'll pause there if anyone's got questions about the master plan update.
Well, for the survey, you said there were other airports you were going to try to send them out to. What were those again?
Anoka, Cambridge, and Mora. So we're working with MnDOT to try to get their airports aircraft registration. I mean, every aircraft owner has to register it to either their own private landing strip or a public airport. So what we'll work with the city to kind of do a hard copy letter and kind of blast it out that way. Now, if we send out 60, we may not get 30 responses, but at least you're making the effort to try to get the word out as much as possible and try to get some other folks who might be interested in coming to Forest Lake, within the near future here.
Are survey responses anonymous?
Yeah, you can either respond with your name and contact information, or you can do it anonymously. You're allowed both options, but then at the same time, I personally can't go in and see who submitted the survey unless you do say you're willing to be contacted about it. So if you're worried about your N number and things like that, none of that is available publicly.
I'm saying that for the record to encourage other pilots who would hear this broadcast or read the transcript of the meeting, that they have the option. That's the main reason.
Yeah, the idea is their responses will really drive the master plan. And everyone is working together to try to help develop the future for the airport, considering the major improvements that you've made. Now you're taking the next step. So all responses is, even if they don't use the airport, never will, it still helps to have that information.
Yep.
Any other questions on the master plan update? All right. With that, something that just kind of came up here recently, working with Mr. Undum. So QT Pod is the current kind of fuel system and card reader that the airport utilizes. Mr. Undum has heard from QT Pod that the equipment that currently serves the airport is antiquated and being phased out. So if a problem arises, in the next next week or next month here, they're unlikely to have the parts to repair the situation. And I know it's been talked about previously about looking to need to upgrade the credit card reader regardless because of new security and technology with chipped cards. So what Mr. Undum is going to do is try to obtain a quote from the same manufacturer about what it would take to install a new card reader and a new pump and a card reader. And MnDOT does fund those projects at 70% state, 30% local. So I'm not sure, Mr. Undum, if you've been able to get a quote yet or working on it.
I reached out this week, so where this started was QT Pod, we have an annual subscription with the company for tech support, for any type of issues that we have with the reader out there. So I did the renewal this year, and as I got the renewal, they noticed they're phasing out support for the version that's out there. But our version, they'll still continue to support it, but what they're saying is that they're no longer producing parts, so they kind of have a boneyard of old parts, and they're gonna sell out of that for a while. So they're saying, start thinking long-term about getting these out of the system, because they're starting to phase them out of their service line. So I did reach out after talking to Silas about the possibility of MnDOT participating in an upgrade. I reached out, I think it was yesterday or Monday of this week, and asked for a quote package for a pump upgrade, because we're not unique in the fact that we have the 3000 version, the 4000 is the next model that comes up. So it's a pretty straightforward upgrade, but they're going to be reaching back out with, when I get that quote package, I'll work with Silas to see if there's a possibility of, at the end of the year, if there's any money available from MnDOT for kind of, so they can expend all their money in their grant budget, there may be a little bit of funding available, and if we have a project kind of teed up, we have a possibility of being funded for it this year. So we're getting it kind of ready, having it in the wings, and if that opportunity arises, we'll be ready to go to have a project to get some additional funding, hopefully, for it. But for right now, we have a service contract that's good for a year. There's nothing on the short term that's really needed on this one. This was more of a, we looked at this as a project, I think in the CIP is 5 or 6 years old. I just kind of wanted to bring it forward a little bit in that, get people thinking about it, just because of the possibility of, if QT Pod all of a sudden doesn't have the part for it, we need to get that fixed. So this is kind of a preemptive planning on replacement of that existing card reader and pump out there.
Well, keep us posted on that, Dan. But we've had trouble with that system before. It's not, so
Correct. And
I'm looking forward to a change.
the other one too, there's a bunch of, like, I know the new ones, I didn't go into, I'm sure that when they reach out with the sales team, will give me more in-depth, what all the bells and whistles are of the new system. But initially we currently have a phone modem. We're a phone line system out there, so it's an analog line that dials out. And the new one's a T1 line, so it's all digital. There's no need to go back. You get a little bit of benefit in this additional security as a result of it. I think it has an upgraded chip reader, backlit keypad. So it brings it into with current technology. But when I saw that they were no longer supporting it, I was like, okay, we got to get this thing advanced. Otherwise, I don't want to get caught, behind the 8 ball on this one.
Oh, that was good.
Nice play, Dan. Is there any,
So the pump and the reader gets changed in this particular case, huh?
I'd have to confirm with QT Pod. I know for sure it's the reader. I don't know if the pump is a part of that reader
I'm just going by
system
what it says
or.
here.
Yeah, my experience, they kind of go hand in hand. And if you're going to invest in upgrading the card reader system, if your pump is kind of the same time frame, you may as well upgrade them both at the same time. That's my opinion, but that's what I've seen done. And kind of Mr. Undum mentioned it, but there's still the possibility that MnDOT has funding, in their current state fiscal year 20. It may not be until, April, May of next year when they're trying to exhaust all their funds in the budget. But either way, we'll get it updated. Kind of, this is rolling to the next topic. Kind of the CIP is also included in your packet. Kind of MnDOT is going to take the snapshot for state fiscal year 21 projects in February. And I know a lot of the CIP development is going to be kind of completed via the master plan. But take a look specifically at the 2021 projects. And is there anything that you guys want to move up to try to get funding for, sooner rather than later, other than, the kind of the fuel pump and the card reader system?
When we're talking about this fuel pump thing, is now the time to look at maybe some auto fuel?
or Swift Fuel? I don't know. Currently, we don't have any need for Jet A at the airport. We almost did with the parachutists, but they left. I've heard nothing but good things about Swift Fuel from South St. Paul. Users are using it down there, and the deal was that auto fuel was not as secure as Swift Fuel. They were worried about the possibility of contamination or purity or parts in it or whatever. And the only reason I know that is because I fly out of South St. Paul with the CAF once in a while. They're satisfied with what they
What's the
have.
difference?
Auto fuel is a little cheaper. It's a little cheaper than Swift Fuel. Swift Fuel is 94, so you can't use it in everything yet. It's not 100 low lead, but I heard their presentation at Oshkosh, and they're working on that. So for high compression engines, it won't work. 8.5 to 1, I think, or 9 to 1 is the cutoff. It keeps longer than auto fuel. It has a shelf life almost the same as 100 low lead, as far as I know, as far as what I heard at Oshkosh at their presentation. Frankly, I think auto fuel is easier to deal with, and if you go through batches, then you don't have to worry quite so much about how it stays in the tank or not. A lot of the airplanes that we have on the field either are STC'd or could be STC'd for auto fuel, low compression engines. But it would involve having another tank. That's just the thing. We would have
Well,
to.
we got two tanks now. I mean, currently, when we buy a load, each one of those tanks, what, 1,500 gallons or
I'm not sure what they're.
2,000?
I don't know off the top of my head.
We need to know how big that is.
Well, Dan, when we buy fuel, how much fuel do we usually buy?
But they're connected, you know, they,
Right, they're currently connected, yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, if they're big enough, you can unconnect them.
yeah.
Is the load when we buy fuel 2,000 gallons or something?
As I recall, we only get a partial load the way it is, and we try and
Correct.
coordinate with either Mora or, somebody north, so as long as they're coming back, then they hit us, or they hit us on the way up. So we don't have a big enough tank to take a full load by ourselves, and that's the kind of a cost factor in our fuel. That's why we piggyback on somebody else.
I'd have to confirm with Dave Adams, because Dave actually does, he kind of handles the fuel ordering out there, and I think it also could be, I don't know how much goes out of those tanks, I don't know if you fill them up to the top, if you don't cycle your inventory long enough, it
Right.
could, degrade in the tank, so I can work with Dave to find out, how much we're ordering, if it's possible to split the two systems out into two, so we could use one for one for the other.
I mean, because I don't think they fill either one of the tanks. I don't think I've ever seen them full.
I know I've never seen them full, but I don't monitor them that often, but I know that I've never seen them full.
Most have been like 2 foot of the tank.
Yeah,
The tank
right.
is 5 feet, so I think maybe we could get enough fuel in one tank
To be a load.
for low lead and then auto fuel the other one.
Can look into
Good.
it.
We don't know how big the tank is. Dave Adams is the one that orders the fuel, is that correct?
That is correct.
Hard for me to talk and type at the same time. Is there any other discussion on this issue? I just had one thing. I'm looking again at page 3 now that we've talked about all 3 items from Bolton Menk. I'm looking at the overhead colored shot at page 3.
Yes, sir.
And I see the runway extensions on there. I see commercial hangar development on the far side of the field. And then I see hangar lot development in 2 green areas. One is where the current T hangars may or may not go, or the current 11 hangars that we're planning on
Correct.
adding would go. And then the other one is on the north end of the field. That's just a ballpark figure. We don't.
Yeah,
have
that
any-
was just
any
preliminary.
configuration, nothing like that. We don't.
Yeah, we haven't looked at it too hard, but just, after taking a look at the photography here, do you guys see my cursor as well on your screens?
yep.
Yes, I do.
So this area right here is going to be a prime location for hangar development as well. It's not a wetland. You can kind of see it on the layout there, where kind of the wetland buffer is, so, and that's close to the fuel, close to the parking lot, so we're, one of the things we'll look at is, once we kind of get some information back from the user survey, is developing this area. Because the concern about going to the south here is that we'd need to get access then, because you wouldn't want vehicles driving across the runway to get to their hangars, and 202nd Street here is just a gravel kind of road.
It's kind of a walkway right now.
Yeah, so I don't even know if it takes vehicle traffic or not, to be
You'd have
honest.
If you came in from the back side, you'd have to have some kind of a security gate or fencing
Yep.
or something,
But and-
because of the,
Just
because
to
of
be-
the athletic area.
Correct, and also that area that's in yellow right there has been that was part of that land exchange, and that area has been kind of already talked about as field expansion, so I just wanted to be that that route. I think what Bolden Mink did was they kind of looked at city-owned property that was around the airport and that. But there has been kind of conversations previous to the planning session where that's actually been looked at, either parking for Fenway or additional field space out there.
Yeah, it's not part of the airport property right now, but there was, like Dan explained, there
Yep.
was a land deal exchange thing that we made. And,
Because even this parcel right here, it says it's owned by the city of Forest Lake, but it's separate from the airport. So we didn't propose any development over here because that looks like a lot set up for some commercial business for town.
and we are trying to sell that as a commercial lot.
Yeah, that's what makes sense. But realistically, I mean, you got a great option up here on the north end, kind of where Hangar Echo is right now. I mean, you definitely could construct a number of hangars or other facilities in that area, and then even over here, where the FPO hangar is currently getting constructed, there's going to be development over here, and then try to, squeeze as much as we can over here, which,
Right.
if things go according to the study, you should have sufficient space to, at least double the number of hangar lots that you have, possibly more, particularly with the amount of space on the north end and then with the access kind of already in place. Now, there are some existing buildings and stuff here that do show up as airport property. I mean, do you guys know for sure if these are actually?
They are,
They are all airport property.
Okay,
the old house is still there from the previous
Yep.
owners, and then the buildings, they're all,
Silas, I have a number of questions. Number one, what about the area in between the hangar area development to the north? It's also airport property, but it's really not developable. Can you move your cursor down just a little bit and to the right, just a little bit to that brown or that black-gray field?
Are you talking
Right
about over
there.
here?
Yeah, right there.
Okay,
It's an
yep.
area that's really not, I mean, it could be developable, but it would take a little bit of finagling to get an access road and all that in there, too.
this area would be, it's farmed right now, the city does own it, but the problem there is getting access to it. That's one of the big things we look at is where it looks great on paper, but how are you going to get somebody to that area? I mean, you don't want them driving through your apron down Taxway Alpha
Right.
over there. And then if you zoom out, to get access to there is going to be quite costly. I mean, you're talking, extension this way, but then considering this parcel of land is kind of surrounded by wetlands north and south, it makes getting access to it difficult. And I want to say this area right here is not airport property. I think this
You got
parcel is owned by somebody
Right,
else.
it's a V cut in there almost,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's why I didn't show anything in this area, just because getting there is difficult.
we had trouble figuring out a way to get the farmer in there.
Yep, you
Yeah.
can see right here, there's,
Yeah.
Yeah, the access.
there's an access that's kind of just, it looked like the culvert is there and then gravel put across there to get to a lot of the farmer
It's not even
there.
a culvert, I think it's just an area that was put in there to actually maintain the water.
Yep. Mr. Schmidt, you had some other questions you
I
said?
do. Just out of curiosity, and this sets up my next question, how many airports does Bolton Menk service, different airport commissions and different airports?
In Minnesota alone or Minnesota and Iowa?
Minnesota. Or I tell you what, I'll go Minnesota to Iowa. It's relevant to the question I have next.
I think it's like 41, 42. I'll get the exact count if you need
Don't
it.
need the exact count. That gives me a ballpark. Is there any airport that Bolton Menk serves that has a T-hanger project or that has had a financially viable, thank you, T-hanger project?
So I'm working on one right now in Granite Falls that's going to take advantage of the state hangar loan program. So they understand that the rent is not going to cash flow their loan payment, but they've committed to, providing additional funding for it for the hope that from years 21 to 40, it's going to continue to generate revenue for the city and then help kind of amortize the cost. So they're taking a very long view on it. That's the only other airport that I know that has taken advantage of the state hangar loan program. But then Granite Falls also is just a state-only airport. Other airports that I've worked on have recently constructed T-hangars, but they receive federal funding where the FAA covered 90% of the cost, which at that point, those hangars are generating revenue for the city in a short order of time. So Hutchinson just constructed one, Paynesville bid one out that's to be constructed here next year. So it's tough without the federal funding because the state only has one mechanism. Now, the state is going through what they call their State Aviation System Plan update. They typically do those every 5 years. one of the comments that they have received from the airport community as a whole is that if they can explore how to use state funding more for construction of hangars and revenue generation projects. Typically, what they've done is they work from the runway out, so they'll prioritize funding on the runway, taxiway, apron, and then they'll get to your fuel, your taxi lanes, but they really don't have a mechanism to fund hangars other than the loan program. So that is something that they're going to be exploring because they do realize the financial difficulties it is to construct a hangar, but then also know in the market, it's tough to have those hangars kind of amortize the loan.
Thank you, then they're aware of the problem, thank you.
Getting back to the T-hanger things, in the city of Forest Lake, I'm here to tell you, if it isn't showing a positive cash flow and you can't prove it, it ain't gonna happen. It's as simple as that. And I know we've tried that many, many times looking at it, and so it's always been a tough sell, you know? Now, was it Granite Falls, did you say that?
Correct, Granite Falls, yes.
Yeah, they're taking a leap of faith to do that, and I think, you know, I think they're recognizing the fact what airports are worth, and we're sometimes kind of hard to prove that, or at least show that, and Forest Lake has always been a hard sell for that.
Yeah, they've been working on it for probably 5 years, and then they finally took the leap, but like I mentioned, I mean, they're taking a very long view of, the funds it's gonna take to construct it now, and looking at it for a 40-year period, so.
Sure, the idea is to get people in here, that's the whole thing, you know?
The third thing and the last thing that I wanted to mention is the definition that we originally applied to what constitutes a commercial hangar and what does not. And the commercial hangar was seen as having access to the, right where your hand is, right there.
Yep.
Having faced access to that aircraft temporary parking area that will eventually be paved with
Correct.
tie-downs. And some people at the airport are not always clear on that.
Yeah, the other thing is the public access on the back side of it, too.
Correct, and the public access in the backside too. And that was the definition, what we had originally said was a commercial building. And some people need to be reminded of that, so I'm just putting that on the public record.
Sure. And when it says on here, commercial hangar and private hangar development, when you see your revised airport layout plan, it's not going to have anything specific. It's just going to say 60 by 60 lot, 120 by 80 lot,
Right.
100 by 100 lot. It's up to the city however they want to designate those
Yep.
for future use, but,
But John is correct the way that was, originally planned that way.
Sure.
Right, through the city, so, and the airport commission back then.
no, great questions. Anything else?
Anybody else? Mr. Palmer, always a pleasure. Thank
Yep.
you very much.
Again, if you got any questions that come up between now and next month, specific to the master plan, don't hesitate to contact me.
Thanks, Sadly.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We are looking at the agenda, and it is rather thin. It is 6:35. We would accept anything from the floor and from the Airport Commission, and then from the floor, since there's no guests, we'll wait for the Airport Commission. Mr. Husnick.
Yeah, I gotta say something, being I was almost late tonight. Is there a reason why we start at 6 o'clock? I mean, it's been kind of a traditional thing, but is there any way that we could change that? Maybe raise it up to 6:30 or 7 or something like that? Because sometimes 6 o'clock is tough.
I have no objection to that. It used to be at 5 o'clock, and it was moved back to 6 o'clock, thankfully, when I was living in southern Minnesota, so that I could get out of school at 3, drive here at 6, and still make the meeting, and then return back to southern Minnesota. So we did move it back from its original 5 o'clock start time to 6. I have no objection to moving the meeting
Well, I
back.
just want at least everybody to kind of think about it and see what, I don't want it to work for me, I want it to work for everybody.
Correct.
You know,
It might work for the public better, too, just because we have a lot of people in Forest Lake that commute.
Yeah.
May I have permission of the fellow airport commissioners to put this item on the agenda for next month's
I think
meeting?
we should discuss it at least.
Yeah,
So moved. All right, we're going to put it on the agenda for next month's meeting.
And that's all I have tonight, so.
Mr.
I
Dahlbeck?
got two things, I guess. Did we ever get the setback with Chris's building squared away? Did they move that, or?
They did. So I did the next morning, followed up with both the zoning administrator and the building official and asked about the stairs in particular. Turns out that they would impede in the airspace, so he is redesigning his project to put those on the other side.
So they would have
They would
impeded.
have, correct. So-
Mr. Dahlbeck, thank you.
But that was a good call on behalf of, who brought it up,
I think Tim brought it up.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it was a good catch, and when it was measured before, it was measured, I can't remember, there was a reason behind it, was an inadvertent, they measured the wrong location, and I was like, when we went back and looked at it, so they are gonna be redesigned. Mr. Olson's aware that I did have a conversation with him. I said,
I thought it was Don Steeler, but if Tim brought it up, fine, but it was a good call, no question about it.
I think they're either gonna be on the side where they are facing the fueling system where there's no requirement for setback on that side, or they'll be internal. He's working through the design part of it right now, but that is a redesign. We did put a note on the file saying, you know, when we get to he can construct the whole building basically, but the stair component needs to get adjusted. So we're just waiting for a new set of plans that show the new stairs location.
He had a statement that he made that it had to be there, it didn't make sense at all, so.
The
Mr.
other thing I
Dahlbeck?
had is we've got the Forest Lake Skydive plane that's sitting out there. Anybody know what the status is?
I do. They are trying to sell it. They've agreed over the phone with me, I don't have it in writing yet, to pay their $2 a day. Parking fee, we have received $0 from them so far. It's been there since August 20th. I have it on my calendar. I wasn't going to move on this just because I don't move independently of the rest of my fellow commissioners. Maybe we should bring that up as an agenda item and talk about it next month if it's still there. I have no objection to somebody wanting to park their airplane. I think it's terrible for the airplane to sit outside in wintertime,
It's just gonna
especially
go
when we have
down.
hangar space, but that's their choice. They can do that.
We actually sent them a letter
We did.
inquiring about it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when we get snow, when we start plowing and we gotta move that
Right.
snow, that plane's gonna be right there.
Right, but we did inquire about it, and I think as of yet, we haven't got an answer back on it. Because my boys are a little bit interested in, just to get it.
That's all I had.
Mr. Munson?
I don't have anything, just glad to be back.
We are glad to have you back, and let that go on the public record also. I've got a couple of items. Number one, I'm just going to remind the public again that there is an EAA chapter forming out at the airport, and I encourage anybody, aviator and non-aviator, to belong to it, just because it's a great way to get started in aviation for cheap, and I'm looking forward to that. Number two, we do need to have an aviation event. I've talked with some of you about this out at the airport next year. I'm going to try and put it on as an agenda item on the agenda for maybe our February meeting is where we started to talk about it or plan for it. Maybe we'll talk about it sooner. In the past, traditionally, we've done it on the third Saturday of August. That was suggested by former Commissioner Don Shipp. It's always been a good date. I would propose that we do that again. It's also toward the end of the summer where there's a lot of fly-ins that don't occur. It's kind of a hole in the fly-in calendar. And usually we don't have rain. Some years we had rain, but usually we don't have rain in August. And it's been a real good date for us. So I just again want to put that out there for us to consider and maybe for the public to consider also. We need to have an event at the airport. We need to show the public what a good facility we have. So those are the two items that I had. Anything else from anybody?
I just have a couple of
Mr.
quick
Undum?
updates. So going back to the fueling system, the fuel filters out there were all just changed out. So we have brand new filters out there. So the maintenance on the fueling system has been taken care of. I also received a call from a travel agent who was looking to do a luncheon in a hangar. Apparently she's bringing a group of tourists down from somewhere up north to see a show next summer in Minneapolis, I believe, and the theme of the show is aeronautic related, and she was looking to see if anybody had hangar space available, and I said, well, the city doesn't own any hangar space, but I don't know if a private hangar out there wants to host a luncheon of travelers, but I figured I would at least bring the idea forward. So if anybody's interested in having a group of, they seem to be well-behaved travelers going in. It sounds like it's a reputable travel agency. She's doing it. Apparently the play they're gonna go see is related to 9/11 and they wanna kind of show that. Apparently one of the flights landed, they had to go hang out at a hangar in a smaller town.
And what's
So
the timeline, Dan?
I want to say it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's like June, I think, of next year is the time frame. She's just trying to get this pre-booked in advance so she can let people know about it, so.
Well, we'd be interested in posting it if, you know, if you can't find anybody else.
If anybody's interested, I can definitely get I can forward the contact information over, but I got the call from the agent last week, and I said, well, city doesn't know anything, and I said, if, you know, there's a private one out there, I said, by all means, you can. work
Well, you
out
can
the
put them in
deal.
the city-owned hangar down on the north end, Hangar E.
I mentioned that one to
Good.
her, and she
We
was
couldn't
kind of
do
like, I
that.
said,
You
it's,
can't say that the city doesn't own a hangar.
I said we did have one, I said, however, it's probably not suitable for a luncheon.
Oh, just a suggestion.
Mr. Husnick, why don't you contact Dan and see if he can make
Yeah,
that
we'll
work?
work that out, unless somebody else is interested in it.
Anything else? Anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Husnick. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Munson, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The meeting is adjourned at 6:42. Thank you.